So, okay, introduction. Howard Shroot, Radford College class of 1994 is interviewing Rachel Moseley, also Radford College class of 1994, about her 20-year career as an Australian diplomat. She is currently serving as Deputy Australian High Commissioner to Papua New Guinea. She started working for the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, DFAT, as a graduate in 2002. She has previously served as a diplomat at the Australian Embassy in Mexico City and as part of the Australian mission to the United Nations in Geneva. She holds a Master's in International Relations from the University of New South Wales and a Bachelor of Arts in European Studies from the Australian National University. She can speak Spanish, Italian, Tok Pisin, which is a language of Papua New Guinea. First question, Rachel. What skills did you obtain at Radford College that you have used in your career at DFAT?
Thank you, Howard. And before answering your first question, I just wanted to say thank you for volunteering to be the representative of the class of 1994 and for taking an interest in what other people are doing. So thank you for this opportunity. But to answer your question, skills that I picked up while at Radford, probably hard work. I remember that we used to have a lot of assignments and homework to do. So I probably learnt some skills there that I used in uni and then later in the workplace. I think that the school also helped us to develop leadership skills. Not that I really recognised it at the time, but giving kids the opportunity to, be a house captain or a captain of music or drama, and, having the opportunity to be a prefect. I think it really helped us develop some leadership skills. But I think the best thing about Radford College for me was the friendships I developed, which have become lifelong friendships. And I was just chatting with, several Radford friends over the last week since being in hotel quarantine. So that's something I took away from school, most certainly.
Thank you, Rachel. Next question. I remember learning Asian studies at Radford and being told as a student about the importance of Australians understanding Asia, especially Southeast Asia, in their future private or public sector career. Did you take Asian studies as a subject at Radford? If so, how has it helped you with your career at DFAT?
No, I didn't take Asian studies. I probably should have. But I came from England when I was a little girl to Australia and had parents that had lived and worked in Germany. So I took German at Radford instead of Asian studies. But looking back, I probably should have chosen Asian studies and probably learnt some Asian languages, as it would have helped certainly in my career. Yeah.
Thank you, Rachel. Now, next question. What other subjects or experiences from Radford have helped in your career?
I think probably learning history at Radford. I think history gives you a good sense of how countries interact with each other. So yes, I think history.
Thank you, Rachel. Now the next question. How was it different being a graduate of DFAT, having actually grown up in Canberra in an environment where most of the other graduates are from all around Australia and new to Canberra?
Yeah, I think it was an advantage. Those years when you're a graduate trainee are a lot of fun. You meet a lot of new friends. But each time I came home from posting, I really was coming home to good friends and family. So I think it was a great advantage.
Thank you, Rachel. What is the most memorable moment in your career?
That's a hard question. I've had lots of really amazing experiences. I think working with the Foreign Minister, Stephen Smith, at the time, I got to do lots of really exciting travel. I got to go to Israel and meet the President of Israel and the Prime Minister of Israel, and go to the amazing Holocaust Museum. That was a real standout. I also got to travel to Cyprus, and I walked along the no man's land, or the buffer zone between the Turkish part of Cyprus and the Greek part of Cyprus. And that was amazing to see all of the sort of bullet-ridden houses and abandoned cars and things that have been like that for decades, and the watch houses along the no man's land. So that was a very interesting experience. Yeah, so I've had lots of amazing work experiences at DFAT. I've been very lucky.
Okay. Thank you, Rachel. What was your posting to Geneva, Switzerland like, and how does Australia's mission to the United Nations in Geneva differ to Australia's mission to the United Nations in New York?
Well, New York is the headquarters of the UN, and you find there some of the principal sort of institutions of the UN. So the UN Security Council meets in New York, the UN General Assembly meets in New York, but there are other regional offices of the UN. So there's an office in Geneva, there's one in Vienna, and there's one also in Nairobi. So in Geneva, there's a bit of an emphasis on humanitarian work, human rights, work around refugees. The UN High Commissioner for Refugees is in Geneva, for example. There's also the World Trade Organization. So you see a lot of trade diplomats working in Geneva. But I was a member of the delegation that represented Australia at the Conference on Disarmament. And the Conference on Disarmament is a body that used to negotiate a lot of disarmament treaties. So, for example, the Biological Weapons Convention, the Chemical Weapons Convention. But most recently, it's been a bit deadlocked. So I worked on, for example, implementation of the Mine Ban Convention. We did work on small arms, and before I left, we started negotiating the Cluster Munition Convention, which was signed, I think, in 2009. And I was really lucky to accompany Stephen Smith to Norway, and I saw him sign that convention for Australia. So that was a real highlight too.
Oh, that sounds very interesting, Rachel. Which multilateral summits have you attended, and what was your role?
So I was in Mexico when Mexico hosted the G20 summit in Los Cabos. So we hosted Julia Gillard, and in advance of that summit, lots of other Australian ministers came through. So the foreign minister, who was Kevin Rudd at the time, Wayne Swan, who was the treasurer at the time. So, I mean, our role was really to support the Australian delegation and to make sure that Australia was across what Mexico wanted to get out of that summit, and also try and influence Mexico so that we were sort of working on common outcomes or common goals.
That sounds very interesting. I understand that you served as an advisor in the office of Australian Foreign Minister Stephen Smith. Can you describe that experience?
So when you're working in a minister's office during the sitting time, when Parliament's sitting, it's a pretty busy sort of period. You tend to get into the office at 7 o'clock. Maybe the minister's doing some media. Then there's sort of back-to-back meetings until question time. So then you're preparing the minister for question time on issues that you're looking after. So I looked after Europe, the Middle East and the Gulf, and arms control and disarmament. So if there were any meetings during the day in my patch, I would attend those. And then you might leave the office around 7 o'clock, or if you were on duty, watching Parliament, you might be there till sort of 10:30 at night. When Parliament rose on a Thursday, because Stephen was from Perth, we used to travel to Perth if it was your sort of turn on a Thursday night, work in Perth with him on Friday, fly back to Canberra on Friday night. So the sitting weeks are really busy. And then if Parliament's not sitting, if he's traveling to a country that you look after, then you travel with him and support his visit.
That sounds like a very busy schedule. I actually remember I'm pretty sure it's 2008 when Stephen Smith was foreign minister and Condoleezza Rice was US Secretary of State, Stephen Smith taking her to Perth. Were you by any chance part of that visit?
No, I wasn't a part of that hometown visit, but I know he really got a lot out of that and really enjoyed hosting her there. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Rachel. Next question. Can you describe your previous TFAT posting of being Assistant Secretary, People's Operation Branch, and your role in holding that position?
Okay, so in that branch, we looked after workforce planning for the department, all the recruitment in the department, all the overseas postings and the placements of staff in Australia. And we also ran the pay. So that was an important part of the job.
Of course. Next question, Rachel. Can you describe your job in Papua New Guinea and what it's like being the deputy head of an Australian mission?
So in PNG, I have 3 teams that I look after. It's a political team, and they also do public diplomacy. So for that team, next year's general elections in PNG will be a real focus. I also look after a team that does a sort of strategic planning for the aid program, and they also look after the gender program. And then I have a security team that I look after too, because I'm what's called the post security officer, and that means that I'm responsible, together with the head of mission, for the safety and the security of all of our staff and their families. So that's in PNG is a pretty dangerous place, so that's a really important part of my job. But more broadly, as the deputy, I have to sort of be across what's happening in the mission. And so from at the moment, COVID is a really big focus for us and supporting PNG in its COVID response. So I'm also kind of involved in that. And when John's away, then I have to look after the shop. So sort of need to be across what's happening at the mission, including all of the attached agencies as well. Yeah.
Well, that is quite a major leadership role. I'm sure Radford as a school is very proud of you.
Thank you, Alfred.
So the next question. On the subject of women in leadership, I noticed that TFAT currently has a woman as head of department and a woman foreign minister, both in my view, very qualified and capable at their jobs. Who is your role model?
Well, I definitely think it would be Frances Adamson. She's the secretary of our department, and unfortunately she's leaving us in a few weeks' time to become the governor of South Australia. So she's incredible. She's a great leader of people. She's a really talented diplomat, and she's done it with 4 children as well. So yes, I really admire her.
Wow. So I can see she's quite not only a woman in leadership role model, but a mother in leadership role model as well.
Yeah.
So next question. It's quite an achievement to reach the level of deputy head of an Australian overseas mission. Your career in TFAT sounds very inspiring and exciting. What message would you give to kids about choosing a career?
I think I would say pick subjects that you really love, that you really enjoy. Don't pick subjects that you think you should study, because I think that if you're studying what you love, then you're more likely to sort of move into, whether it's TAFE or university, move into that sort of area, and then that can shape, you know, what you do for work. I would say, you know, work really hard at that. I don't think I was at all by any means the smartest kid in our year, but I just worked really hard, and I managed to somehow get to where I wanted to go through working hard. And then I would say, you know, feel free to change your mind, to change tack, because, you know, what you might want to do at 18 might not be what you want to do at the age of 40. So feel free to change things up. And yeah, that's, I think, what I would say.
Thank you. What I what are your most favorite and least favorite parts of your job?
The most favourite part of my job would probably be travelling to different countries, meeting people and experiencing different cultures. The least favourite part of my job would probably be working through jet lag, but there aren't too many bad parts of the job.
So this is the last question. What can you tell us about your overseas travel with PFAT as an official part of an Australian government delegation?
Well, I mostly did that when I was a bit younger, and when you're a sort of junior officer, you're sort of responsible for writing the brief, supporting the more senior members of the delegation, and often you're kind of up late working with room service, sort of drafting up outcomes of meetings, but it's really a sort of a supporting role.
Okay, and now it's your turn to interview me.
Yes, I wanted to ask you a few questions too, Howard, so it wasn't just all about me. So Howard, can I ask you what you got out of being a student at Radford?
So the things that stick out in my mind is a strong sense of responsibility, citizenship, and community service. I feel that Radford helped me to understand the importance of these values, mainly by including activities that represented these values, even though it's not obvious at the time. After finishing Radford, it was just obvious that looking at the world through a rights and entitlement lens just wasn't productive. And looking at the world through a responsibility, citizenship, and community service type of lens was clearly the way forward to progress. I also remember on our very first day of year 7 being told that the aim of every student's education at Radford was to reach their full potential and not just what was needed to get a job and start a career. I also like the healthy balance that Radford provided students in being able to have constructive class discussions and debates, including sometimes controversial issues, while at the same time maintaining respect for different viewpoints. One specific thing that really stands out in my mind is Mr. H, Mr. Hooker, giving a lesson about the lyrics of Peter Garrett of Midnight Oil's song Blue Sky Mines, and how the song told the story of the asbestos mines in Western Australia that had been shut down a year or two earlier, and how the song related to like the whole picture with all the different stakeholders, with the workers and the shareholders, and like just how it worked. Many years later, I often heard and saw Peter Garrett on the news as Environment Minister. I never forgot Mr. H's lesson.
Yes, I see they're celebrating him, aren't they? Because he's wrapping up after 30 years or something at the school. So it's nice to see them doing something for
it's I can't imagine the impact that he had. Just in my time, I can see a huge impact, and there's all the years since. It's just immeasurable. I don't think anyone can measure it.
No, I agree. Howard, you've written and posted about some of the colleagues in our year who have passed away. Can you tell us a little bit about those people and what they meant to you?
So they were both in a lot of my classes. So Anthony, better known as Tony Gardner, he had an amazing ability to be very funny, but at the same time, it was never at anyone else's expense. So looking back, like I find it truly amazing that any not yet adult teenage high school student can master that balance. It's really quite something. And Scott King, I always knew he was like really, really big on fishing. And being in touch with him on Facebook, when I saw him move to Papua New Guinea and like design the life that he really wanted, rather than just fit in a job in the framework of society, I like the more I saw his posts on Papua New Guinea, like all the like experiences of him fishing and like some of the humongous fish that he caught, he posted on Facebook. I thought, wow, he's like, it might not be my dream, but this fellow student of mine is really living his dream.
Howard, can you tell us a little bit about your journey after school? What did you do when you left Radford?
So when I left Radford, initially I had a spare parts traineeship, which I started in Canberra, and just because of the contacts I have, I ended up finishing it in Sydney. Then I took a short break. I volunteered on a kibbutz in Israel and took a Kentucky tour of Europe. Then when I came back to Australia, I did a computer power course, and I worked in a number of computing jobs, contract jobs in Canberra and Melbourne. The thing that stands out the most was the contract in the public sector at IP Australia, being part of a Windows 95 and Office 97 rollout for the entire department. So after that, in 1999, I moved to Israel. I spent 6 months learning Hebrew. It's known as Ulpan. I had a basic foundation, but I really needed a lot of improvement to function in Israeli society. When I finished that course, I joined the website team of the Jerusalem Post, Israel's main English language newspaper. I was part of that team for about 2 years. So within that team, I was assigned to a new project they created, Jerusalem Post Radio. It was a whole new thing to have audio on newspaper websites. So that job I find extremely exciting. I got to work alongside journalists, and from time to time, I met a number of VIPs, including now the current Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who was, at the time, he was former Prime Minister, and he was a private citizen and was basically free to say whatever he felt like, which is a grand prize for a journalist interviewing him. My responsibilities included archiving interviews and news bulletins, finding photographs from archives and the online AP and Reuters wires, and website maintenance, and doing like out-of-the-box research for journalists, and most importantly, finding the contact details when they wanted to interview someone.
Cool. And so did you then stay in Israel, or what happened to you next?
Yeah. So when that finished, I spent 2 years studying in a yeshiva, which is an institution of Jewish religious studies. And in 2004, I returned to Australia, and for the next 5 years till 2009, I lived in Melbourne and worked a number of computing related jobs, did a bookkeeping course, and furthered my computing studies at RMIT.
Very good. And so what are you doing now for a career?
Right now, I'm doing research and lead generation from a California-based real estate finance company. So basically, I make salespeople's jobs easier by doing the hard non-sales work for them. And I also find myself putting good use of my skills of just putting together random pieces of information to find a phone number. And yeah, over the
Very
last
good.
decade. Yeah. And
Sorry, you go on, Howard.
just over the last decade, I've done a few jobs related to startup companies, and I did a technical writing course. Okay.
Cool. And do you ever come home? I know it's very hard with COVID now. It could be a while off, but can we expect you? I don't know. Can we expect you home for our next reunion?
Very, very good question. More likely not than yes. But I've been home twice in the last 12 years. My parents, at least until COVID, visited Israel every single year.
Right.
Just having a young family, I've just been limited in my ability to be able to travel.
Yeah.
So it's just been, so I've only, like, I got home in 2011 with my wife and my then baby son, who's now 10, for my sister's wedding. And I also managed to fit in a trip to South Africa. My wife moved to Israel from South Africa to see her family and friends and extended family. But my 6-year-old son's never been to Australia. The only other trip I made back to Australia was for less than a week for my father's 70th birthday in 2018. My brother and sister were last in Israel for my wedding in 2009. So with COVID, I basically have a WhatsApp relationship and Zoom relationship with my family in Australia.
Yeah.
Thank you very, very much, Rachel, for the interview.
Thank you, Howard. And I hope that maybe you can aim for our 30-year reunion in 2024 or something. Hopefully we'll see you in the flesh soon, Howard. Thank you so much.
I'm going to try. I just can't make any promises.
All right, Howard. Bye for now. Take care of yourself.
Okay, bye.
Bye.